Ambassador had seen many species join the Galactic Council over his 3 centuries of service, but none quite like the humans. They arrived in their crude metal ships, speaking in rough tongues, and wearing simple cloth garments that seemed almost primitive compared to the flowing biosilk robes of the crystalline armor of the. The human delegation consisted of 12 representatives from their home world, Earth. They called themselves diplomats, though noticed how their eyes constantly scanned the room, exits, and potential threats. Their leader, a woman named Sarah, stood barely half the height of most council members, yet she commanded attention simply by existing in the space. "Honored Council," Sarah began, her voice carrying an odd quality that made even the translator matrices pause. "We come seeking membership in your alliance. Earth offers its resources, its people, and its commitment to peace among the stars." The assembled aliens exchanged glances. The humans seemed so ordinary, so unremarkable. Their technology lagged behind most species by several centuries. Their ships could barely manage faster-than-light travel, and their weapons were based on primitive chemical propellants and basic energy projection. Counselor Hun, a towering with mandibles that clicked when he spoke, leaned forward. "Tell us, humans, what makes your species worthy of membership? What do you bring that the galaxy needs?" Sarah smiled, and something in that expression made several council members shift uncomfortably. "We bring perspective, Counselor. We bring solutions to problems you didn't know existed." "Such as," pressed High, her crystalline features reflecting the chamber's light in prismatic patterns. "Well," Sarah said, pulling out a small device, "let's start with something simple, your security system." She activated the device, and suddenly every screen in the chamber displayed classified council documents, including defense protocols, member world locations, and even personal files of the council members themselves. Alarms began blaring as the station's security AI frantically tried to regain control of its systems. The chamber erupted in chaos. Guards rushed forward, weapons drawn, while counselors shouted in a dozen different languages. Through it all, Sarah stood calmly, her hands visible and empty. Hao demanded, his usually composed demeanor cracking. "Your security assumes that everyone thinks like you do," Sarah explained as her device restored the systems to normal with another button press. "Linear, logical, predictable. Humans don't think like that. We think around corners, through problems, and sometimes in ways that don't make sense until you see the results." Counselor, a tall reptilian whose scales shifted color with emotion, hissed softly. "You hacked our most secure systems in seconds. This is exactly why your species is dangerous." "Dangerous?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "We just demonstrated a vulnerability in your defenses that could be exploited by any number of hostile forces. We also showed you that we have no intention of using it against you by immediately restoring everything to normal. If we wanted to hurt you, would we be standing here talking?" The truth in her words was undeniable, but it didn't make the council members any more comfortable. They had built their civilization on predictable interactions, clear hierarchies, and logical progressions of thought. The humans operated by different rules entirely. Over the following days, the human delegation continued to surprise and unsettle the council. They solved a trade dispute between the Ani and that had been deadlocked for decades, by suggesting a solution so simple that both sides felt embarrassed for not seeing it themselves. They identified 17 separate security vulnerabilities in the station's design, including 3 that could have been exploited to destroy the entire complex. But it wasn't just their problem-solving abilities that disturbed the council. It was how they thought about everything. Dr. James, the expeditions, spent hours in the station's archives, reading about the various species and their histories. When he emerged, he sought out for a private conversation. "Your people have been spacefaring for how long?" asked without preamble. "Nearly 1,000,000 of your years," replied with pride, "though we're among the first to achieve interstellar travel." Nodded thoughtfully, "And in all that time, you've never encountered a species that waged war on itself?" The question caught off guard. Of course not. Such behavior would be evolutionary suicide. Species that turn on themselves don't survive to reach the stars. "Interesting theory," said quietly. "It's wrong but interesting." Before could respond, alarms began sounding again. This time, it wasn't a human demonstration. 3 warships had appeared at the system's edge, their intentions clearly hostile. The N were a relatively new species to the galactic community, aggressive and territorial. They had been pushing against Council space for months, testing defenses and probing for weaknesses. Now, it seemed, they had decided to make their move. "All defensive stations, prepare for combat," High commanded. "Signal the N vessels to withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response came in the form of plasma torpedoes launched directly at the station. The Council's defensive grid activated, energy shields flaring to life just in time to absorb the impact. Return fire was swift and precise, but the N ships were well-armed and determined. In the chaos of battle, no one noticed Sarah making her way to the station's central communications array. By the time security realized what was happening, she had already begun broadcasting on an open channel. "N vessels, this is Ambassador Sarah of Earth. I know you can understand me. Your translators are good enough for that." The attacking ships paused, clearly confused by this unexpected communication. "You're attacking this station because you think the Council is weak," Sarah continued, her voice carrying across the void with crystal clarity. "You think these species are soft, civilized to the point of helplessness. You're not entirely wrong." In the station's command center, Council members stared in horror at the screens showing Sarah's unauthorized broadcast. "But here's what you don't know," Sarah said, and now there was something in her voice that made even the hardened N warriors listen. "There's a new species here, one that's been fighting wars longer than your entire civilization has existed. One that learned to kill with rocks and sticks, then metal blades, then chemical explosives, then nuclear fire, and finally with pure energy. We've been perfecting the art of warfare for 60,000 years. She paused, letting that sink in. "We've fought wars that consumed entire continents. We've built weapons that could destroy our own planet. We've faced extinction more times than we can count, and every single time we've found a way to not just survive, but to become stronger. We are the species that looks at the impossible and says, 'Hold my beer.'" The N ships hung motionless in space, weapons powered but not firing. "So here's my offer," Sarah said quietly. "Leave now, and we'll pretend this never happened. Stay, and you'll discover exactly what humans mean when we say proportional response. Trust me when I tell you that you really don't want to find out." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the N vessels began to withdraw, their pilots apparently deciding that discretion was indeed the better part of valor. As the immediate threat faded, the Council members turned to look at the human delegation with new eyes. These weren't primitive newcomers seeking protection. They weren't even equals looking for partnership. They were something else entirely. Councillor Hunn's mandibles clicked nervously. "What exactly are you?" Sarah smiled that same unsettling smile she had worn when she first addressed the Council. "We're humans. We're problem solvers. We're survivors. And we're really, really good at making friends with people who want to be friends and dealing with people who don't." Doctor stepped forward, his expression serious. "Every species you've encountered has been filtered by the same evolutionary pressure. To reach the stars, they had to be cooperative enough to work together, peaceful enough to avoid self-destruction, and logical enough to solve complex problems. You've been selecting for specific traits for millions of years." "But humans didn't follow that path," Sarah added. "We reached the stars not despite our violent nature, but because of it. Every war taught us something new. Every conflict forced us to innovate, to adapt, to become something more than we were." Felt a chill run through his elongated frame. "What are you saying?" "We're saying," Sarah replied softly, "that you've built your entire galactic civilization on the assumption that violent, chaotic species don't make it to space. You've created a peaceful galaxy because you believed peace was the only way to survive technological advancement." She gestured toward the viewports where the N ships were disappearing into hyperspace. "But we did survive. We not only survived, we thrived, and now we're here offering our hand in friendship. The question is, what does that mean for your nice, orderly galaxy?" The Council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They had invited a species of warriors into their peaceful alliance. A species that had literally fought its way to the stars, that saw conflict not as something to be avoided, but as something to be mastered. High's crystalline features seemed to dim. How many more species like yours might be out there, species that followed the same path? Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. "We've been monitoring your communications since we achieved interstellar capability. In all your records, all your exploration reports, we've found evidence of hundreds of extinct civilizations. Worlds that show signs of having reached technological advancement before somehow disappearing. Yes, said slowly. We've always assumed they destroyed themselves through warfare or environmental collapse. Some probably did, agreed. But others might have simply chosen a different path. They might be out there, watching, waiting, deciding whether you're worth their time. Or whether you're a threat, Sarah added quietly. The weight of this revelation settled over the council like a shroud. For millions of years, they had believed they represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization. They had thought their way was the only way, their peaceful alliance the natural end point of evolutionary development. Now they were being told that their entire understanding of the galaxy might be fundamentally flawed. So, Counselor said, his scales shifting through a spectrum of colors that indicated deep thought, what do you propose we do with this information? Sarah looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each council member in turn. First, you accept that your galaxy is not as empty or as peaceful as you thought. Second, you realize that you need allies who understand conflict, who can think like warriors when necessary. And third, asked. Sarah's smile was neither threatening nor reassuring. It was something else entirely, a promise of things to come, changes that could not be stopped or avoided. Third, you start preparing for the day when one of those other species decides to make contact. And trust me when I tell you that they might not be as interested in talking as we are. The council chamber fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of a galaxy that had just realized it was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. And sitting in the middle of that danger were a dozen humans who claimed they could help navigate it. Whether that was a blessing or a curse remained to be seen. 3 months after the N incident, the galaxy had begun to change in ways that made many council members deeply uncomfortable. The humans had been granted provisional membership, but their presence seemed to catalyze events that no one had anticipated. Dr. the Human Expedition's archaeologist stood in the ruins of Iran Prime, the latest in a series of extinct civilizations that the council had decided to investigate more thoroughly. The official records stated that the Iran had destroyed themselves in a nuclear war approximately 50,000 years ago. The evidence, however, told a very different story. These aren't impact craters from nuclear weapons, explained to the mixed team of human and alien scientists that accompanied her. The blast patterns are wrong, the isotope signatures don't match, and there's no fallout residue. Researcher L, a graceful whose species were considered the galaxy's premier archaeologists, examined data with growing confusion. But our analysis clearly showed signs of atomic warfare, the radiation signatures, the geological upheaval. All consistent with weapons fire from orbit, interrupted gently. Specifically, the kind of focused particle beams that they currently use in their defensive grid, same energy signature, same residual effects. The implications hit the team like a physical blow. They had been founding members of the council, their crystal-based technology considered the most advanced in the galaxy. They were also known for their strict adherence to council law and their absolute commitment to peaceful coexistence. Impossible, whispered the representative on the team. His crystalline structure flickered with what had learned to recognize as distress. My people would never. Your people 50,000 years ago might have been very different from your people today, said carefully. Evolution doesn't stop with space travel. Social evolution, moral evolution, technological evolution, they all continue. Captain Reed, the human military observer assigned to the expedition, knelt beside a partially melted structure that had once been a city center. Look at this. The damage pattern suggests multiple bombardment runs over several days. This wasn't a single strike or even a brief conflict. This was systematic. Joined him her trained eye taking in the evidence that lesser archaeologists might have missed. A siege, she agreed, or an extermination. The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Genocide was a concept that most council species found literally unthinkable. Their evolutionary paths had selected against such extreme aggression so thoroughly that the idea of deliberately wiping out another sapient species was almost incomprehensible. Perhaps, Elle suggested desperately, the Oran attacked first. Perhaps this was defensive. And exchanged glances. It was possible, but the human understanding of warfare suggested otherwise. They had found similar patterns on 3 other extinct worlds in the past month, all showing signs of systematic destruction from orbit. We need to expand the investigation, decided. If this pattern holds across multiple worlds, multiple time periods, we might be looking at something much bigger than isolated incidents. Back on the council station, the results of the expanded archaeological survey were causing panic among the leadership. Of the 43 extinct civilizations on record, 37 showed signs of orbital bombardment rather than self-destruction. The evidence pointed to a systematic campaign of extermination that had been going on for hundreds of thousands of years. Ambassador Sarah sat in the emergency session of the council, watching as the galaxy's most powerful leaders struggled to process information that humans would have found disturbing but unsurprising. War, after all, was humanity's oldest profession. The implications are staggering, Hai was saying, her crystalline features dim with shock. If these findings are accurate, someone has been systematically eliminating emerging civilizations for. Not someone, Sarah corrected quietly. Multiple someones. The attack patterns are too varied, the time periods too spread out. We're looking at different species, different technologies, different methods, but the result is always the same. Counselor Hun's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. But why? What could possibly motivate such genocide? Sarah supplied. Lots of reasons. Resource competition, territorial expansion, xenophobia, religious extremism, simple bloodlust. On Earth, we've managed to find excuses for genocide based on everything from skin color to agricultural preferences. The casual way she spoke about such horrors made several council members recoil. To them, Sarah might as well have been discussing the weather. But you stopped, said hopefully. Humanity evolved past such behavior. Sarah's laugh was not reassuring. We got better at it, not past it. We developed international laws, global monitoring systems, mutual deterrence. We learned to channel our aggressive impulses into sports, politics, and economic competition. But the capacity is still there. It's always there. Doctor entered the chamber at that moment, his face grim with new information. Sarah, we've found something else. Long-range sensors have detected energy signatures consistent with active civilizations in sectors that our hosts marked as empty space. How many? Sarah asked, though her expression suggested she already suspected the answer. Hundreds, maybe thousands. They're using some kind of stealth technology that makes them effectively invisible unless you know exactly what to look for. The council chamber erupted in shocked voices as the implications sank in. The galaxy wasn't peaceful because violent species had destroyed themselves. It was peaceful because violent species had learned to hide, to watch, to wait. And now, thanks to humanity's arrival and their subsequent investigations, that carefully maintained illusion was beginning to crack. They've been watching us this whole time, whispered Counselor, his scales cycling through colors that indicated fear. Studying us, learning about us while we thought we were alone. Not alone, Sarah corrected. Safe. You thought you were safe because you'd created a galaxy where only peaceful species could be seen, but predators don't advertise their presence. They hunt from the shadows. Captain Reed activated a holographic display showing the locations of the hidden energy signatures. The pattern that emerged was chilling in its implications. The stealth civilizations were positioned at strategic points throughout council space, forming a network that could monitor, and if necessary, control all major shipping lanes and communication routes. It's a surveillance grid, Reed explained. And if they wanted to, they could shut down council space in a matter of hours, cut off trade, block communications, isolate member worlds from each other. But they haven't, pointed out desperately. Surely that means something. If they wanted to destroy us, why wait? Sarah studied the display thoughtfully. Maybe because you're not a threat. You've proven over millions of years that you're peaceful, predictable, controllable. You're like sheep in a pasture. Why would a farmer kill his sheep when they provide wool and milk? Are you saying we're livestock? His voice was barely a whisper. I'm saying you might be a resource, Sarah replied bluntly. Your technology, your knowledge, your labor, all valuable to someone who thinks in terms of exploitation rather than cooperation. The chamber fell silent as the council members absorbed this new perspective on their existence. Everything they had believed about their place in the galaxy was being systematically dismantled by a species that had been part of their alliance for less than 4 months. "So what do we do?" Hun asked finally. Sarah looked around the chamber, meeting each alien's gaze in turn. "You have 3 choices. First, you can pretend this conversation never happened, go back to your comfortable illusions, and hope that whoever's been watching you continues to see you as harmless." She paused, letting that option settle. Second, you can try to make contact with these hidden civilizations directly, attempt to negotiate from a position of obvious weakness, and hope they're feeling merciful. Another pause, longer this time. Or third, you can accept that your galaxy is not the peaceful sanctuary you thought it was, and start preparing to defend yourselves against forces you don't understand using methods you've never had to consider. "What exactly are you proposing?" asked, though his tone suggested he already knew he wouldn't like the answer. "I'm proposing that you let humanity do what it does best," Sarah said simply. "We understand predators because we are predators. We know how to think like warriors because we are warriors. We can teach you to fight because fighting is what we do." Doctor stepped forward, his expression serious. "There's something else you need to consider. The energy signatures we've detected aren't all the same. Some of them are massive, orders of magnitude beyond anything in Council space. If this network includes species that have been hiding and advancing their technology for hundreds of thousands of years." He didn't need to finish. The implications were clear enough. "We're not just talking about hidden civilizations," Sarah continued. "We're talking about potential galactic superpowers that make the entire Council look like children playing with toys." Counselor Hun's crystalline structure flickered rapidly. "How do you know so much about this? Your species just achieved interstellar travel. How could you possibly understand these concepts better than civilizations that have been spacefaring for millions of years?" Sarah's smile was cold and sharp. "Because we've been living with this reality our entire evolutionary history. Every human city exists because someone fought for it. Every human achievement exists because someone was willing to die to protect it. Every human child grows up learning that the world is full of things that want to kill them." She gestured toward the display showing the hidden civilizations. "You've spent millions of years in a carefully maintained peace, thinking that your way was the only way. We've spent 60,000 years in a state of constant warfare, learning that survival requires eternal vigilance and the willingness to do whatever is necessary to protect what matters." Captain Reed activated another display, this one showing human military doctrine and strategic thinking. "We've had to develop concepts that your languages don't even have words for. Asymmetric warfare, mutually assured destruction, acceptable casualties, strategic depth, operational security. We think in terms of worst-case scenarios because worst-case scenarios is how our species learned to survive." "But at what cost?" asked quietly. "What kind of beings does such constant conflict create?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "Dangerous ones, unpredictable ones, ones that can be your greatest allies or your most terrifying enemies, depending on which side of the line you choose to stand on." She looked around the chamber one more time. "The question isn't whether you can trust us," she continued. "The question is whether you can afford not to. Because ready or not, your peaceful galaxy is about to become a very different place. You can face that change with allies who understand conflict, or you can face it alone with species that have been preparing for war while you've been playing at diplomacy." Heiss' features seemed to grow even dimmer. "If we accept your help, what happens to us? What do we become?" "You become survivors," Sarah said simply. "Everything else is just details." As if summoned by her words, alerts began sounding throughout the station. Long-range sensors were detecting movement in the outer system. Ships, energy signatures activating, the careful silence of centuries finally being broken. The Hidden Watchers had apparently decided that the time for observation was over. The galaxy was about to discover what lay beyond the comfortable illusion of peace, and humanity was about to prove that sometimes the monsters you invite in are preferable to the monsters already waiting outside. The age of innocence was ending, and the age of truth was about to begin. The first ships were massive beyond anything the Council had ever seen. Each vessel stretched nearly 50 kilometers in length, their hulls black as space itself, and covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. They appeared at the edge of the system like materializing nightmares, their very presence seeming to bend space around them. Admiral Sarah, She had been promoted rapidly in the 3 days since the crisis began, stood in the council station's command center watching the displays with the calm focus of someone who had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. Around her, alien officers struggled to process sensor readings that their understanding of physics. 47 vessels confirmed, reported Lieutenant's brother who had been hastily assigned to the defense coordination team. Energy output on each ship exceeds our entire orbital defense grid by a factor of approximately, well, a lot. Technical term, Sarah asked dryly. We don't have instruments that can measure energy output this high, admitted. Our sensors keep overloading and shutting down. Behind them, the emergency council session was in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species argued in multiple languages, while their translation matrices struggled to keep up. The only thing they seemed to agree on was that they were completely unprepared for this situation. How long until they reach the station? Asked Hai, her crystalline form flickering with stress patterns. At their current speed, 14 hours, Captain Reed replied from his position at the tactical station. But that's assuming they maintain their present course and velocity if they decide to accelerate. He didn't need to finish. Everyone understood that if these mysterious ships wanted to reach the station quickly, there was very little the Council could do to stop them. Have they responded to any communication attempts? Sarah asked. Nothing direct, reported from the communications array. But they've been broadcasting on multiple frequencies. The translation matrices are having difficulty with the languages involved, but we're getting partial translations. What are they saying? His expression was troubled. They're discussing us, analyzing our defenses, our technology levels, our probable responses to various scenarios. They're treating this like a tactical planning session. Sarah nodded grimly. It was what she had expected. The hidden civilizations had been watching for so long that they knew everything about Council capabilities and nothing about human ones. That might be the only advantage available. What's the status of the human fleet? She asked. Checked his displays. 12 ships currently in system with another 18 hours out. It's not much against what we're facing. It's enough, Sarah said with confidence that surprised everyone present. Remember, we don't have to win, we just have to make them reconsider their assumptions. Counselor Hunn's mandibles clicked nervously. What exactly are you planning? Sarah turned to address the assembled council members. For the past week, we've been analyzing the energy signatures and movement patterns of these hidden fleets. They operate like we would expect from a highly advanced, technologically superior force. They rely on overwhelming firepower, superior sensors, and technological advantages. That sounds logical, observed. It is logical, Sarah agreed. It's also predictable, and predictable opponents can be defeated by unpredictable tactics. Doctor entered the command center at that moment, carrying a collection of artifacts that she had excavated from the destroyed worlds. Her face was pale but determined. I found something, she announced without preamble. In the ruins of the Oran capital, buried deep enough that the bombardment didn't destroy it completely. It's a message, recorded just before the final attack. She activated a holographic display that showed the translated text of the Oran message. The words that appeared made everyone in the command center fall silent. To whoever finds this record, we are the Oran and we are about to die. The Watchers have decided that our species has become too dangerous to allow survival. Our crime was developing weapons that could threaten their ships. Our punishment is extinction. The message continued. Know this, the galaxy is not empty, it is carefully managed. Species are allowed to develop to specific levels of technology and no further. Those who exceed the boundaries are eliminated. Those who remain within acceptable parameters are permitted to continue existing as long as they pose no threat to the established order. Pause the playback. There's more, but this is the important part. The Watchers aren't just random predators. They're gardeners. They've been cultivating galactic civilization for hundreds of thousands of years, removing any species that grows beyond acceptable limits. And now humanity has arrived, Sarah said quietly, with technology and thinking patterns they've never encountered before. We've forced them to reveal themselves ahead of schedule. The implications settled over the command center like a shroud. The Council hadn't just been living in a protected garden. They had been living in a carefully maintained zoo, with humanity's arrival representing the first time a predator had been accidentally introduced to the habitat. "What makes you think we can succeed where so many other species failed?" asked. Sarah looked at the tactical displays showing the approaching fleet. "Because every species that was eliminated was fighting the Watchers' kind of war. They tried to match superior technology with superior technology, greater firepower with greater firepower. They played by rules that guaranteed their defeat." "What rules would you suggest?" inquired. "No rules," Sarah said simply. "The first thing humans learned about warfare is that honor gets you killed. The second thing is that fairness is a luxury you can't afford when your species' survival is at stake." Captain Reed activated another display, this one showing the deployment of human ships throughout the system. To most observers, the pattern looked random, almost chaotic. But with her archaeologist's eye for hidden patterns, began to see the logic. "You're not trying to defend the station," she realized. "You're trying to create a specific situation." "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "The Watchers expect us to deploy defensively around high-value targets. They expect logical formations, predictable strategies, conventional thinking. Instead, we're going to give them something that violates every assumption they've made about galactic warfare." Looked up from his sensor station. "Admiral, the lead Watcher ship is hailing us directly. They want to talk." "Put it through," Sarah ordered. The voice that came over the communication system was unlike anything the council members had ever heard. It was multi-tonal, harmonic, beautiful in its complexity. When the translation matrix processed it, however, the words were chillingly simple. "Council Station, this is Fleet Commander of the Watching Fleet. You will surrender immediately and prepare for inspection. Any resistance will result in the immediate sterilization of this system." Sarah stepped forward to the communications array. "Fleet Commander, this is Admiral Sarah of the Human Defense Fleet. We decline your request." There was a pause that lasted several seconds. "Human Defense Fleet? We have no records of such an organization." "That's because we just made it up about 10 minutes ago," Sarah replied conversationally. "We're new to the neighborhood." Another pause, longer this time. "You cannot be serious. Our forces outnumber yours by more than 40 to 1. Our technology is beyond your comprehension. Your defeat is mathematically certain." "You're absolutely right," Sarah agreed cheerfully. "We can't possibly win a conventional engagement, so we're not going to fight one." "Explain." Sarah smiled, and even the Watcher's translation system seemed to struggle with the predatory satisfaction in her voice. "We're going to do something that your species has apparently never encountered in all your centuries of galactic management. We're going to cheat." Before the Watcher commander could respond, Sarah cut the communication. Around the command center, human officers began implementing a plan so audacious that most of the council members couldn't believe they were serious. Sarah said, "How long does it take for a star to go supernova after we introduce artificial instabilities to its core?" Checked her calculations. Approximately 47 minutes from initiation to critical cascade failure. "And the blast radius?" "Complete sterilization of everything within 12 light hours." The council members stared in horror as the implications sank in. The humans were proposing to destroy the entire system rather than allow the Watchers to take control of it. "You're insane," whispered Hun. "That would kill billions of innocent beings." "No," Sarah corrected. "It would save trillions of innocent beings throughout the galaxy by demonstrating that the age of Watcher control is over." Reed checked his tactical displays. "All human ships are in position. We have clear targeting solutions on the star's photosphere." Sarah looked around the command center one final time. The Watchers have built their entire civilization on the assumption that other species will always choose survival over principle, self-preservation over sacrifice. They've never encountered a species crazy enough to burn down the galaxy rather than submit to tyranny. She activated the ship-wide communication system. "All council stations and member worlds, this is Admiral. In 30 minutes, we're going to broadcast our tactical recordings on every frequency we can reach. Every species in the galaxy will see exactly what the Watchers are and exactly what they've been doing for the past 1,000,000 years." The communication continued. "More importantly, they'll see that the Watchers that their ships can be damaged, their plans disrupted, their control challenged. Sometimes all it takes to start a revolution is proving that the tyrants aren't invincible." Commander's voice crackled over the speakers again. You are bluffing. No species would commit such an act of cosmic vandalism. Commander, Sarah replied, let me tell you something about humans. We're the species that invented the concept of mutually assured destruction. We're the ones who built weapons capable of destroying our own planet just to make sure our enemies couldn't have it if they defeated us. We are absolutely, completely, and terrifyingly serious. She paused for effect. We have 32 minutes to reach an understanding. I suggest you use them wisely. The next half hour was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The Watchers, for the first time found themselves negotiating from a position of uncertainty. They had overwhelming military superiority, but they were facing an opponent whose strategy was based on principles they couldn't comprehend. Monitored the stellar modification equipment, ready to trigger humanity's ultimate bluff at Sarah's command. Around her, Council members watched in fascination and terror as their peaceful galaxy transformed into something entirely different. 5 minutes remaining, reported. Commander's voice returned, but now it carried undertones that the translation system identified as stress and confusion. What are your terms? Sarah's response was simple and non-negotiable. Complete withdrawal from Council space, termination of the Watcher surveillance network, full disclosure of all eliminated species and the locations of their worlds. Most importantly, recognition that the age of galactic gardening is over. Impossible. We have maintained order for hundreds of thousands of years, Sarah interrupted. And now that order is ending. The question is whether it ends with negotiation or with the spectacle of an entire star system being turned into a weapon of protest. There was a long silence. Then, if we agree to these terms, what guarantee do we have that other species will not follow your example? Sarah's laugh was genuinely amused. Commander, that's not a threat. That's the entire point. We're not trying to replace your tyranny with our own. We're trying to end tyranny entirely. 2 minutes, reported, her hand hovering over the stellar destabilization controls. Finally, impossibly, the voice of Fleet Commander returned with words that would echo through galactic history. We accept your terms. The massive Watcher ships began to withdraw, their dark hulls disappearing back into the void from which they had emerged. But the galaxy they left behind was irrevocably changed. Within hours, the human tactical recordings were being broadcast on every frequency. Hidden civilizations throughout the galaxy watched as a handful of primitive ships had forced the mighty Watchers to retreat. More importantly, they learned the truth about their carefully managed existence. The revolution that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Species that had hidden in the shadows emerged to reclaim their birthright. Civilizations that had been eliminated began the long process of rebuilding. The rigid order that had defined galactic politics for millions of years crumbled in a matter of weeks. Ambassador Sarah, she had decided that Admiral was a temporary title, sat in her office on the Council station, reviewing reports from throughout the galaxy. The transformation was chaotic, often violent, and completely unpredictable. It was, in other words, exactly what she had expected. A soft chime announced a visitor. Doctor entered, carrying a data pad that contained the latest intelligence reports. The Watchers have honored their agreement so far, he reported. Their surveillance network is being dismantled, and they've provided coordinates for over 300 eliminated species worlds. Any signs of them preparing for a counterattack? None that we can detect. If anything, they seem to be withdrawing further into their own space. It's possible that our little demonstration broke something fundamental in their worldview. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. When you've spent 1,000,000 years believing that you're the galaxy's gardeners, it's probably quite a shock to discover that you're just another species with guns. Studied her expression. Do you think we did the right thing? The galaxy is going to be a much more dangerous place now. Sarah looked out the viewport at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, species that had been hidden or eliminated were rebuilding their civilizations. Somewhere else, the Watchers were learning to live without absolute power. And everywhere, the galaxy was discovering that peace imposed by force was not peace at all. James, she said finally, humans have never been interested in safety. We've always been interested in freedom. Now the galaxy gets to find out what freedom actually costs. She turned back to face him, her expression serious but hopeful. For the first time in 1,000,000 years, Every species in the galaxy gets to choose its own path. Some will choose peace, some will choose war, and some will choose something entirely different. It's going to be messy, complicated, and probably terrifying. Sarah's smile was the same one she had worn when addressing the council for the first time, months earlier. In other words, it's going to be interesting. And if there's one thing humans have always preferred over safety, it's interesting times. The galaxy had learned the human truth, that sometimes the greatest act of peace is the willingness to make war, and that sometimes freedom can only be preserved by those crazy enough to risk everything to protect it. The age of watchers was over. The age of choice had begun. And humanity, as usual, was responsible for turning a perfectly ordered galaxy into something wild, dangerous, and magnificently unpredictable.